Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's Idea Sharing webinar. I'm Paul, and I work in the marketing team here at eviivo. And with me today, we have David Weston, Chairman of the B&B Association, and James, who works with me in the marketing team at eviivo, helping me host. And today's webinar very much continues on the theme and the idea with discussion around the things we need to be doing and thinking about now in preparation for our businesses reopening and as demands starts to return, with a hopeful reopen at some point during July for most of us. Our guests today are Melinda Beckett-Hughes, owner of Ayuda House, Karen Wells West, owner of the Sanctuary in Cornwall, and Karen Foster, CEO at Guest Talk. And we'll be talking with all of them a bit later on about ideas and processes around reopening. As I mentioned at the start of all of these webinars, this is a great idea for us all to come together and share our ideas. We know the independent accommodation sector is full of entrepreneurial and innovative people, and it's great to see so many of your ideas and questions coming in through the course of the week. We have the events at eviivo.com email address for people to submit ideas and questions to. I'll try and touch on some of those during the course of the webinar, and of course try and follow up on those as well directly if it's more suited to do it that way. So thank you to all of those who've been doing that so far during the week. And if you would like to do that whilst you're on the webinar, you can do that using the chat functionality, using the button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Just off to the right, there's a little icon there. And James will be keeping an eye on that during the course of the webinar. And if there's any sort of good general pertinent questions that we can ask, we'll try and get to those too. Okay, so first up, David Weston will give us a little bit of an update. He works tirelessly on behalf of B&B owners with his ear to the government, has an update for us now with regards to sort of plans going forward. David.
Thanks very much, Paul. And it's nice to see everyone. I think we've got more people than we've had before on these webinars. That's great to see. Thank you. Nice to see you. And just to introduce you to those of you who haven't seen me before or been on one of these, where the B&B Association is the trade association for B&B guest house and small hotel owners, and we're here to support you, keep you informed, and fight your corner, as Paul said, with government, with regulators. So over the last several weeks of the lockdown, our main focus has been on helping, lobbying for more financial support and filling in the gaps in the original support for B&B owners. Now, in the last week or two, the focus has moved more, almost 100%, to working on guidance to help B&Bs and guest houses reopen. And on reopening dates, the England date is the 4th of July, although that's still provisional. We may not get much notice because the retail sector were only given sort of confirmation yesterday that they will be opening on Monday, so 6 days. I'm hoping we'll get a lot more than that, but it doesn't look like it will be much more than that. So that's 4th of July provisional date for reopening in England. Northern Ireland is 20th of July. That's a bit firmer, that date. Wales, very sadly, unfortunately, the First Minister of Wales has said that he doesn't think it's likely that hospitality will be open much this summer at all in Wales, which is very bad news for B&Bs and guest houses in Wales. Today, Fergus Ewing, the Scottish Tourism Minister, has announced that their date for opening in Scotland is 15th of July, so a bit after the English one. So we've got several different dates for reopening, and everyone will have to be COVID secure, so it means doing a risk assessment, a COVID safe risk assessment for your business based on guidance. We shared on one of these webinars a week or two ago the UK hospitality draft guidance, and it seems like, as of today, it seems that guidance document, the final version of it, is going to be endorsed by the government. It's currently being looked at by Public Health England, the Health and Safety Executive, and 10 Downing Street, alongside the official government guidance from the Tourism Department, DCMS. And the idea is that the government will, in some form, officially endorse the UK hospitality protocols. Sorry about this, it all sounds complicated, but that means that we, the B&B Association, are really going to have to pass on the majority of those protocols because they will be government endorsed. But then we're going to add our own context for B&Bs and guest houses to that. So you'll get probably more guidance than we were initially hoping we'd have to give. It's not going to be slimmed down so much as sort of added to, but that's because it's going to be officially endorsed, the UK hospitality guidance. So we're working on finalising all that, getting it to members and everyone as soon as we possibly can. So you've got as much as you can to work through it all. But all of those who've seen the draft that we circulated a couple of weeks ago will have already been able to start thinking about it. And the message for everyone is just start thinking through your business, how you can make it COVID secure.
Just on the risk assessment, sorry, just on the risk assessment, David, because that's, as you mentioned it there, you might as well jump in with that question. We had a few questions coming in about risk assessments. Is that going to be part of that, within that sort of guidance as such? Yes,
what we're going to try and do is give a risk assessment, not only a risk assessment form, but a couple of examples to show what other people, relevant businesses have done. But obviously the whole principle of risk assessment is like with the fire risk. You have to do your own and have looked at your own property. But obviously, to be helpful, we're going to include examples of what other people have done. But yes, we've had a few detailed questions in about that kind of thing, and there will be, just to say that there will be a lot of instances where people will have to use their own judgment to a large extent, because no guidance can cover every aspect, and a lot of things depend on your own individual circumstances. So I think you had a question from a specific question on that, Paul, did you?
Yeah, absolutely. So a number of people sort of asked about the risk assessment and where can I get hold of it, but it's great that there'll be some examples of that available and some completed ones. Well, I think that's really useful because people can see then exactly what's happening. The questions that we had a lot, one from Robert and Sheila at Cambridge House, was in particular reference to kind of shared areas or common areas where guests would maybe congregate, how to keep those clean, can they still be used, can they still be open, what's sort of general thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that you can do is take out a lot of unnecessary things, sort of declutter things, and in general that's one of the principles of both bedrooms and common areas, taking out stuff like cushions in bedrooms and things in common areas that might be touched a lot could be, if they can be, could be temporarily sort of removed. That's one thing that can be done. But another thing to say is a lot of this will depend on guests themselves cooperating and respecting, social distancing and safety guidelines. And one thing we're going to sort of recommend is that on booking, if possible, for those who haven't booked already, on booking you get guests to sort of agree that they will respect safety guidelines, social distancing, etc., because a lot of it will depend on them. People have asked us things like, we've got narrow corridors and we've got rooms next to each other. What if two lots of guests come out of the room at the same time? Well, obviously there's no way you can be everywhere and physically stop things like that happening. So to some extent, the guests themselves will have to, like we've all got used to doing it in shops and everything, the guests themselves will have to say, if they both come out in the corridor at the same time, one will have to give way to the other, so they go down, 2 meters apart, whatever. So so the guest has a lot of responsibility as well on things like that.
Yeah.
You can't control everything, but then obviously you'll have to manage things like serving breakfast, to stagger it or separate tables or serve it to rooms, or all of these other possibilities to make things safer.
Definitely. Another good question, and a few people have asked similar, to be fair, during the week. Kate at Millbank Guesthouse, who was actually one of our guest talk speakers a couple of weeks ago, she makes the point about if a guest becomes ill at a property with suspected COVID symptoms, what is the sort of advice there? Is it for them to go home? Is it for them to stay? Of course, it might be very difficult for someone to then stay put in a property. It might not be doable, really.
Again, the guidance hasn't quite finalised yet that we're working with, which makes things very difficult. The draft we've seen at the moment says that person, if they become ill while they're staying with you, should stay there for 14 days. Well, I think that's what seems odd and very difficult, and it obviously opens up lots of questions, because what do you do about people who are booked in after that person in that room? What do you do with other guests? So there's a lot of questions to answer on that. We're going to look into that and see what we can do about clarifying that guidance. So what happens if you get a case? Yeah. If you get somebody who's left or leaving and is suspected, you're advised to leave the room vacant for 72 hours, because that's long enough for the virus to die on all surfaces. So that's the advice for people who've had symptoms and left. But it is very difficult, yes, if we're advised to people should stay for 14 days. And I admit, well, I agree with the questioner that it's extremely difficult for the host. So we're going to try and clarify that one. But whatever the final government guidance says, I mean, that's what we're going to have to go with, I'm afraid, because we'll be potentially, judged on that, and there are going to be sort of sanctions if people are found to flout it to some extent. So we'll have to try.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, interesting one, but hopefully once sort of put that to people, maybe there'll be a slight tweak of that. Let's see what happens there, because it could potentially be difficult to sort of obviously follow that up with future guesting and then booked in for later dates. Okay, so James, is anything coming through on the chat question-wise at all? We sort of go.
Yeah, so we've got lots. Thanks everybody for your for the questions. We've had a lot of questions, and if we don't get around to answer them here, we'll definitely follow up with you after the after the webinar. David, there's a lot of questions about the risk assessment itself in terms of the kind of content and actual, some of the guidance. Some of the specifics around, I think in one of the previous webinars, so Caroline was asking about, previous guidance around the temperature, for example, that, we should be kind of washing linens and what have you. Do you know, will the risk assessment or will the guidance when it comes out be detailed to that level in terms of, to giving, guidance around, the temperature, for example, that you can wash linens, or would soap and water suffice, for example? Have you had any sight of those?
I understand. On the official guidance and things issued by Public Health England are not hugely helpful, because they say things like fabrics must be washed according to the recommendations from the manufacturer, that kind of wording. We're trying to make sure we're more helpful than that, and getting in our guidance specifics about temperatures to wash things in, and about cleaning materials in terms of what active ingredient you should look for and the concentration of them, and that kind of level of detail, just to try and be very helpful. And to how long the virus is deemed to last on different types of surfaces, so what sort of cleaning you need, and that kind of thing. So we're trying to give as much useful information as possible on that. It's going to be quite a lot of detail, but that's what people really need and look for, and not all of it will be applicable to everybody, but it'll be there to help people.
Okay.
We've sort of publishing lots of cleaning hints and tips as well on the eviivo.com/coronavirus page, and there's a webinar tomorrow actually about cleaning, a masterclass webinar for eviivo customers that's happening, that will dig into cleaning again. We've talked about cleaning on a few of the past webinars too, which are all viewable on the eviivo.com/shared-webinar page. Maybe James can throw some of those links up during the course of the webinar, and there's some really useful resource in there from previous guests and so forth that have been expert in that field talking about it.
Great. So, David, just one last question that's kind of come through as a bit of a theme on the chat, is around the kind of the disparity of lockdown guidance across regions. So you mentioned before that sort of England, Northern Ireland, Wales, and Scotland have got different guidance, when businesses in those areas can open up. I think the feeling is that even within England, there may be some kind of disparity in guidance if we start to see some resurgence of the infection in regional areas. Is that something that you've been given insight to in terms of how that will be communicated? Will that be communicated at a local level? Is there a resource that people should be familiarising themselves with to keep abreast of that kind of regional advice?
No, it's not quite clear yet how that would work. The government have said that they envisage that it may be possible, it may be necessary to have local lockdowns. I mean, nobody wants this to happen, but the government is saying if there was an outbreak regionally, then it's possible they could ask an area to lock down again. Nobody wants that. And I was just on earlier this afternoon, this visitor economy working group meeting, which is chaired by the Minister of Tourism. And he was mentioning that and emphasising that nobody in government wants to see another lockdown if it can possibly be avoided, because it would have such a really devastating effect, everyone thinks, that because confidence is a little bit fragile at the moment anyway in a lot of areas, not just from potential guests but from local communities being worried about people coming in to stay. So if there was a second wave in a particular area, that would really be bad news, and we all want to avoid that. But we don't quite know how it would work. Everyone's just hoping at the moment that it won't have to happen. The official guidance for what to do and how to be safe will be the same for the whole of England. It may differ slightly in Scotland or Wales because they're devolved administrations, but it will be, the actual guidance will be the same for the whole country of England. And the other thing I was just going to say in terms of keeping everyone informed as well, to add to what you said, for those of you who are not members of the B&B Association, do follow us on Twitter, keep an eye on the website, our B&B Association website, and of course the eviivo website with their coronavirus page, because we'll publish gradually information as it comes up there, and tweet things out and tweet bits of news between during the week between these webinars. So just keep an eye on everything, and as soon as we get news, we'll let everyone know.
Okay, great, thanks for that. So there's lots more questions, so I'll if we've not got back to your questions specifically, I'll try and summarise them and pose them to David during the webinar. But so Paul, back to you.
Thanks very much. Great. Okay, good stuff. Yeah, we do record everything, all the chat as well, so we'll take a look at anything that we don't get to today on live, as it were, and follow up afterwards. Good. So first up then, our first guest this week is Melinda Beckett-Hughes from Iuda House up in Cheshire. Melinda, are you there?
I am indeed. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Melinda. How are you? Thank you so much for joining us today. So maybe if we can kick off just a little bit about your background and how you came to run Aida House.
Yes, well, I started in HR consultancy in 1983 and moved into doing coaching and mentoring in about 97. No, anyway, about then. And, worked up to very senior level doing executive and board level coaching, and really enjoyed that, worked with some very interesting people. But after the crash 2009-10, things became much more difficult. The market was tougher. I got a bit disenchanted with corporate life and, collecting the money. And then my children left home. And had quite a large house, and so I decided to turn it into a B&B. It was really just a hobby to start with, a bit of a change and a bit of a detox from corporate life. And then I took to it, and people came, to my surprise, said, "Oh, this is amazing, there should be more places like this. It's very boutiquey, and there's a big dearth of places where I am." So it took off, and then I realized I'd need all the licenses, permissions, the council planning and so on. So by the time I'd got everything set up, it was a couple of years in, and I was committed. So it was a rolling stone gathering moss, and I became a quite, the whole thing about the ratings and rankings and assessments, became quite compulsive for me. So, it's a whole thing about improvements, both physical and environmental and service improvements. So, just keep us at the top in terms of the ratings. And then about 18 months ago, I thought, well, I felt a bit frustrated that I'm, so professionally qualified in the area of personal and professional development. I decided I wanted to introduce that more into my working life. And I had the plan hatched about a year ago that I would kind of combine my coaching career with running the B&B and start to offer retreats, but especially because of the intimate nature of it, more for ladies. So it was about last September that I launched the website, iudagroup.com, which was putting Aida House out there as a retreat house for ladies, both coming on a one-to-one stay and in small groups. So that really then was going to be my emphasis going into 2020. I was going to run down the pure B&B and ramp up the ladies' retreats. So what would happen in a retreat? Somebody would come with a set of objectives. It might be just de-stress, recover from burnout, lose weight, have lots of, relaxing treatments, but also work on relationships, career, business, maybe start a business. So not just me doing everything, because I'm not a personal trainer or a nutritionalist per se, but I was, putting that all together in a package.
Yeah, so this idea of packages is an interesting one, isn't it? I remember when we were talking during the week, potentially as we come out of the pandemic and we can open up again, this sort of concept of staycations and concepts of package, we think could be something that customers will maybe be looking for as they can't go abroad and get a similar experience.
Well, I definitely think so, because from my knowledge of some other B&B owners, they often come into it like me, having had a different professional background. They may be a chef, or they may be, somebody who's been very into horticulture or ornithology or into, I don't know, yoga. They may have had a professional career, or they may have a big hobby. And like me, if you thought of maybe integrating them both, you could make a really interesting experience for somebody coming. And then, maybe if it was a group, you could have, cooking classes, or you could have, National Trust tour weekends and put everything on, or, bird watching or cycling or whatever, put it all together as an experience, as a little mini holiday. Because a lot of people do come to where I am, which is in Cheshire, and they do visit the markets, they do visit the National Trusts, and they go over to Liverpool, and they, go to the Trafford Centre. There's a whole range of things, but you could put that together into a little, weekend break and there's a lovely spa as well. They do packages. So I think as more people, even when we can travel, people might be reluctant to travel because of the risks, but they still want to have a family holiday. And I think that if people can, put together these new ideas, we might attract more people to come and stay. But where particularly some special care is taken for the children, because most families that go away with children don't want to be with the children 24 hours. They'll go on a package holiday because they can put them in the kids club, they can have them supervised for swimming lessons or whatever. So I think if we had some sort of facilities for childcare, so that would be set up, that the kids could be taken off by very well qualified and checked out animator that takes them swimming or takes them to the park or tumble tots or whatever, that would give the adults a chance to have a bit of a chill out, or in the evening go to the theatre, set up theatre tours, or this kind of thing, really. So I think we just have to be a lot more creative.
Yeah, I think you're right. Thinking outside the box, and in terms of maybe bringing in an interest that as an owner you might already have. How can you work that into a package and be more appealing, and sort of replace that summer holiday that potentially people would be taking every year abroad? How can you sort of replicate that to a degree in the UK?
That's right.
The other thing then, with regards to sort of your background and the coaching and the sort of psychology of everything, you mentioned there about it being important for guests to feel safe in terms of coming to stay at a property. Is there anything you sort of point out that kind of key things? Obviously, there's the cleaning side of things and what other preparations you're making in the property to make it safe. But any sort of real sort of points of interest that you think people will be looking for when they come to book a holiday?
I mean, the whole sense of care and cleanliness has to be there in any event, with a B&B. In my case, I actually had a lot of hand sanitizer manufactured at the beginning and had it all branded with my business. So, yeah. So when anybody enters the property, they get a complimentary branded sanitizer with the hotel number on it, and some gloves. And actually the people who have a bathroom, I give them their own set of little washing up kit. So I've got some washing up liquid and a cloth and everything, so rather than have to go into the room and take the cups and clean the cups and empty the bit, I actually allow them to self-manage. If people, obviously they've got to eat, they can't go to a restaurant, so they have to have food in. So, they've got a plate, set of cutlery, crockery and everything, washing up liquid cloth and a basin, so they can do their own, and at least then it's under their control. And really we wouldn't enter the room for a few days stay, except to offer a towel, a clean towel or something like that, and that's optional. So when I've not been offering, I have had a few stays with key workers, no breakfast involved. The only difficulty I had was I've got a self-isolating guy. I've had a guy came to stay during lockdown who unfortunately can't fly back to his own country. He's got to get back to Thailand, and Thailand have closed all the flights. So he, poor guy's had to stay with me. He'll be with me over 2 months, paying a nightly rate. So he's become almost like a lodger, and I've pity on him and given him a microwave and loads of frozen foods. So that's kind of working out okay. But there was an instance where there was another guest that wanted to use the same microwave, and I felt, no, that's not really fair. If I'm going to let somebody use the dining facilities and the microwave and the fridge, really you can only have one guest doing that, because you can't control who comes in, puts this light on, opens the fridge door, if they're going to walk down. So yeah, the antiseptic wipes are everywhere in all the rooms as well. So it's very kitted out. I've even got it on the front door, sanitizer, and on the back of the door in a dispenser. So I don't know. I mean,
It's good. So you've been sort of testing some of these processes that to have going forward when you can open up already, and some of those it sounds like they seem to be working, so you can continue with them for when other bookings sort of.
I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And then I guess the other point, perhaps before we finish, Melinda, of course, with your background in sort of life coaching and psychology and so on, there will be owners out there that potentially a bit apprehensive maybe of opening up again. You know, they've been shut for 3 months or so. A lot of properties wouldn't have had sort of key workers in at all. They've sort of had their doors closed and could be a bit scared to sort of open up and accept people back into their business when obviously there's still the infection out there. What sort of advice could you give to them?
A real issue. I mean, at some point we're going to have to get back into normal life. So we have to reacclimatize ourselves and learn to trust ourselves, you know, to be able to make judgments and move on safely. Otherwise, we're going to become hermits and not do anything. And there is an issue. I'm not going to go into the biological aspect of it, but I do have a bit of a strong personal feeling about the notion of too much lockdown lessens people's immunity, and we must actually boost our immunity. I feel my immunity, because I've so much self-care during the lockdown, I've never felt healthier. I think my immune system is bulletproof personally, so nobody's going to get past it, no virus is going to get past it. That might be a bit on the over bullish side, but I can absolutely say that some people will be nervous, some people might not even feel they can get back into it. There's the whole issue of the fact that, you know, you've lost so much momentum, and you know you've sort of so detuned from it that the pushing the ball up the hill again and getting it going, you know, for some people might just seem really too much. And particularly if you can only, in my case, I've got 5 rooms and then a self-catering apartment, and in my case I will not open up 5 rooms again. I will open up 3 rooms plus self-catering. So you've still got to be here, do the work, put the facilities in, do the waiting, and you know you're going to get less revenue. So the risk, the work reward is different. You know, that equation is different. So for some people it might just not be so viable, but that's why in my case I think, well, that's all right, because I want to earn money in professional fees to compensate that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess as people start to open up, it's really kind of also reminding themselves and ourselves about what they were good at, what really worked in the past. You know, all those good reviews businesses have had it previously. You know, that hasn't gone away, and it's not been anyone's fault that we've had to shut at the end of the day. But it's remembering that and trying to sort of bring confidence back and sort of crack on, I guess, to a degree.
And there could well be, you know, people are really desperate to get a break and come back. People so appreciate it. And, you know, hopefully we've had a time of being a bit refreshed ourselves. I know I was really burnt out. I was so grateful for the lockdown. I was really burnt out. I was working that out. So that's kind of good. If you are a little bit more still in yourself, you're a little bit more, you know, relaxed, you've thought through a few more things, you're a bit clear on where you're going, maybe it gives a better experience to the guest. And you've got to decide if you've loved it, why have you loved it? And you've got to go back to those feelings of what you really loved about it and get really in touch with those feelings.
That's great.
And you know, try and really reconnect and make those feelings so strong in you that it attracts the type of customer that you want in the future.
Thank you, Melinda. That's fascinating. Really fascinating insight, because obviously you've got the 2 hats there in terms of the sort of 2 sides of the business and also from the sort of mindset side of things, as well as sort of yourself running the business itself. So really interesting to chat. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thanks for asking.
Good stuff. Okay, so James may have a couple of minutes for a question. Otherwise, we'll go straight on to the next guest if there's anything that's come through.
Sure. So Melinda, a lot of the questions were around the risk assessment stuff, which I think we can follow up with some links after the after the webinar. With some kind of general practical questions about, you know, offering packages, and some people asking about, you know, does it have an impact on insurance or liabilities? Do people have to, you know, consider, you know, those kind of things before they can offer some of the packages that you're offering?
I think if you're going to be doing coaching and working on people's lives, you need professional indemnity insurance in any event. But apart from that, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to be doing cooking courses and having people eating, you need to make sure you've had some, you know, proper course in food safety.
Sure.
You know, it's all very well doing just doing breakfast, and I've got, you know, 5-star food rating. But if you're going to be doing, you know, cooking demonstrations and eating all together, that might need another level of training and, you know, checks. I don't know, because I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
It's a good question, but something definitely to be mindful given the specific of what people might be offering. But I think this idea of having an activity attached to a stay, and I think our next guest sort of does a bit of that as well, which we'll perhaps touch on with Karen in a second. But yeah, of course, you would need the relative qualifications and insurances in order to do so, for sure. Good stuff. Okay, thanks guys. Right, so next up, next guest this afternoon, Karen Wells-West from the Sanctuary in Cornwall, down there in the southwest. How are you, Karen?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you again for joining us today. Much appreciated. So maybe if we just sort of kick off, you can tell us a bit about the Sanctuary there.
Yeah, so actually it's happened at the worst point of time, because we only opened last July, so we had a very short first season, and then I thought, yeah, I'm gonna hit it this year, and this has happened. So anyway, so we're not much worse off than we were this time last year. But the Sanctuary is a completely off-grid eco build. It's in 12 acres of rather steep wood and pasture, and it overlooks the Foy estuary. So, as I said, we only just started it last year, so we had about 2-3 years of building and planning and everything else, whilst running our kayaking business, which is also down, works on the river here as well. So we'd run that for about 9 years now. With a very much environmental wildlife kind of theme to what we do, and we realized there wasn't much accommodation for people coming down to kayak, apart from very expensive hotels, nothing in between, and particularly nothing with bed and breakfast. So we got some planning permission to take down the old barn and build a brand new purpose-built building. So I have 4 bedrooms and a large classroom, meeting room, but luckily I can also turn that into a self-catering apartment, which looks like that's going to be quite useful this year. I've also got another breakfast room as well, where normally my guests meet around a great big 3-meter table. So I'm having to think an awful lot, a bit like Melinda, about probably only having 2 out of my 4 bedrooms occupied at any one time, and sort of leapfrogging them so that I keep them separate, and I keep my guests as separate as I possibly can. At the moment, being off grid, we're fine. We've got loads of sunshine and water and everything else, and it's fine. It's more challenging sort of October to February, but we do tend to close at those months. So we're learning how to deal with all of that and guest requirements as well.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's frustrating. You sort of put all these processes in place, having just started last year and tried and tested them, probably got them down to which ones work, which ones don't, and now having to think about a whole new way of working now. What other sort of things or processes have you sort of come up with or started to trial or will put into place when you can have guests again?
I think mainly I don't personally feel, in some respects, I will do a lot of things differently. It's really useful listening to some of the other people talking, because my biggest problem is around breakfast, because I've always laid out a buffet breakfast in the kitchen. People come in, and the whole idea is to have it's to demonstrate about off-grid living for a start, and people that want to try it, not just on holiday as a quirky thing, but things home that they can use. And so the great idea, I mean, my best times are when everybody's sitting around the breakfast table all discussing this, that and everything else, and it's wonderful. Now I can't do that from now on, so that's where I'm starting. That's my biggest problem I've got, and I can see probably taking breakfast to a room, or allowing couples at each end of a table with their separate breakfast things, as Melinda said. That's really helpful actually, Melinda, about having washing up and everything in your room, and asking your guests to do that, because normally I get people to leave out stuff outside and then I go and wash it up and everything. So that's different. But from cleaning and stuff, I don't anticipate needing to do anything more. I've discussed with my laundry lady that I will strip the beds, leave the laundry for 72 hours bagged up, take it to her, she will wash it and she will bring it back after 72 hours. So I'm using that, as David sort of said earlier about the 72 hours, leaving it clear that any potential problems are dissipated by doing that, which means I will only have 2 bedrooms out of 4 going. But I think I would rather have that, because I have peace of mind, and hopefully my guests will have peace of mind as well. Again, like Melinda, it's hand sanitizer in the main door and as you go out, and also to give them some hand sanitizer and encourage them to use it as well. The apartment side is completely separate, so the guests never ever meet. So the chances of 2 sets of guests actually wanting to come in the front door at the same time are fairly slim. And again, it's about common sense, and hopefully people will be so desperate to get away and have a bit of peace and quiet. They'll understand all of this. And I've always had my guests join in and really buy into what we're trying to do, and trying to be green and sustainable, and they get quite excited and enjoy all that. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to get them to do the same thing, you know, so we're all happy and we're all relaxed about it, because after all, they're paying you money to come and have a holiday and a good time. They don't want to feel that they're entering a sort of, I don't know, antibacterial zone where they're all swiped down every 5 minutes. It's not going to make them very relaxed and everything else. So it's trying to manage it. It's a bit like being the swan and being, you know, all very serene on the surface, and then running around cleaning everything frantically when they can't see it, but to make them feel kind of very relaxed and very welcome. I mean, that's the whole thing.
It's going to be a massive balancing act, isn't it? You're right, sense in terms of you feeling confident, but also very importantly that the guests feeling confident and happy whilst they're having a stay, so they can have a good stay at the end of the day. And I know one of the reasons why people come and stay with you is your kind of green ethos and your outlook in terms of how you do things. Do you think, you know, the new norm, as it were, that we're entering now in terms of how travel has to be, certainly for the foreseeable months, is that going to impact on what you can do there from that kind of green perspective? You know, are you going to have to use different types of cleaning methods and so forth, or are you going to be able to still stick to that kind of type of break?
I'm hoping very much so, and again, a little bit until we see the last of the things that are laid out. It does make this quite difficult, but at the moment I'm planning to do exactly what I do for the rest of the time. Everything is thoroughly cleaned anyway. You've got to do a good job when people come in. My personal thought is, if the virus, you have to wash your hands so much because it's soap and water kills it, cleaning everything with soap and water is also going to dampen down the chances of anything spreading. I make up all my own cleaning products, so I'm only using natural cleaning products, but there are things, like hydrogen peroxide. Also we have hand sanitizer that is made in the village by the local gin distillery, that we have quite a few of them locally, who are now giving hand sanitizers as well. So it's a nice quirky touch that it's a leftover from the gin making process, which is rather good. So it's using all of those, and I've done that all my life. It's nothing fancy from doing it with this particular project. I've always done it, so that's what I'm hoping to plan to do. I'm not a fan. I've got septic tanks. I can't afford to be throwing antiseptic have people throw antiseptic wipes down. I can't just throw, you know, nasty chemicals down.
Yeah.
And there are an awful lot of things that will hopefully do exactly the same thing, but in a much more biodegradable and sort of eco-friendly way. So
Yeah,
that's the theory.
that's great.
Whether I'll
That's
be
great.
able to do that or not, don't know.
A lot of this is we can plan and we can see guidelines, but until you're actually in a situation, you're testing these things, it's going to be, you're going to have to refine processes and so on, again, just to see if it does actually work. But I think it's great that you've sort of been reaching out to those local suppliers. You've had the chat with your linen company already. You're looking at sources of hand sanitizer and so on and so forth, and probably would encourage other businesses to do that in their local communities as well, right? Because there will be help out there.
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully. I mean, we are blessed in Cornwall with rather a lot of gin manufacturers, so that is something. I guess if you're in Scotland, you'll be all right with all the distilleries up there as well. But it is, I mean, most of my stuff tends to come from the local community anyway, because that's another big part of our business is promoting local and the circular economy and everything else like that. So yeah, that's quite important to us.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. That's been really interesting to hear from you and talk to you today. Thank you for giving us your time, and wish you all the best as you start to hopefully get guests come through in July.
Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Cheers, Karen. You take care. Right. James, maybe time for one quick question if we had one.
Yeah, well, actually, we've got a lot of questions around, again, the specifics of risk assessment, which we can probably look back in if we've got time at the end, and then some regulatory ones for David, maybe towards the end. A couple of specific questions for you, Karen, but we can share those with you after, if that's okay. But yeah, no, I think we're good to go, Paul.
Good stuff. Great. So second Karen of the day then is our next guest, Karen Foster, joining us from Guest Talk. Karen, are you there?
I am. Hello.
Hello, Karen. How are you? Thank you so much for coming on today. And we're going to have a look a bit around the concept of managing guests contactlessly, and an element of how we're going to operate going forward that may become more important to enable us to sort of interact with guests and manage their stays in this new world that we're all sort of moving into. So maybe you could tell us a bit about Guest Talk and how that concept might be coming in, but how you can also help.
Yeah, so Guest Talk is a communications platform. So we enable SMS, email and social media messaging through one inbox. And no matter where it's coming from, your staff will be able to see the messages coming in and respond through one without having to switch platforms. So we do a variety of things. So we automate quite a few messages around the pre-arrival stage. So it's about, welcome, here's all of the information you need to know about your stay. You can, what a lot of our customers are doing at the moment are doing some pre-arrival surveys where they're asking guests, well, first of all, they're telling guests what measures they've put in place to protect them. And they're also asking for some specific information about what their expectations are of the stay. So, for instance, they're going to operate a reduced laundry facility, and they're not going to go into the rooms as often for cleaning. But, how many towels do you anticipate that you'll need during your stay, so that they can then go on and make sure that they've got enough laundry towels and laundry bits around that. So
that's really interesting. So this concept of pre-planning before the guests arrive to make sure that they're still going to have a good level of service, even if it's not going to be face-to-face and direct. The kind of software is helping to do that. Exactly.
And then also around check-in as well. So if you're slightly bigger and you can do your planning around, what time do you want to arrive? Do you want to arrive between 2 and half 2, and then have your next person arrive around 3, and sort of stagger it that way, but also do the guest requests. So, the guest is in the room and something's happened and they need, I don't know, a new kettle, or they need some towels. They can text or message the reception and get that through without having to come downstairs, potentially meet people in the corridors and stand in reception in a queue. So there's that aspect. And then for the hotel side, they can then forward those to the relevant staff members. So, that limits the contact there as well. So, and the same with providing some key information around, what services are on offer in the area, what the taxi number is, the best way to get somewhere. So it's all of that communication that you can have back and forth. It's still person to person, so it's not sort of a robot messaging back. So it's still person to person, but you don't have to expose either person to potential infection sites.
I think there's a really interesting point there that you made quickly about the staff side of things. If businesses are slightly bigger and they do have staff, that's another thing they're going to be needing to think about, how they're going to manage and interact with their staff on a day-to-day basis. So if the time together can be limited in this way, that can only be useful going forward as well, I guess.
Exactly. And the software is all mobile based, so it's all web based. So whatever device you need, they don't even have to have anything special. They can do it on their mobile phone. They can have a tablet or be it a desktop computer, and all of the messages are coming in. You can tick them off to say that they've been actioned. You can have automatic responses go out to guests as well and forward to relevant people. So for instance, if it's things like common information like the Wi-Fi code or breakfast times or even booking breakfasts, you can have them set up on keywords so that they just text in Wi-Fi. It comes back to them with the code. So nobody needs to get involved or leave in any particular area. And the same for things like we integrate with remote lock, digital lock companies as well. So we can send out the room codes. If they forget the code, they can trigger it to come back to them. Staff can open and unlock and lock doors from remotely, so they don't need to go if anything's not working.
Okay.
So you've got that aspect as well. So it's trying to make sure that communication is flowing, but automated as much as possible.
Yeah. So I guess the thinking here is, and B&Bs and guest houses, and the reason why we go and stay in them and love them is, you do have that face-to-face time with the owner, and that's great. But in the new norm way of travel, obviously we won't be able to do that, or shouldn't necessarily be doing that as much. But it's what functions you can almost remove from needing to do that by automation, maybe something for businesses to think about. And then the time that you may still have with your guests, it will be less, but it will be very personal, very focused on them enjoying themselves rather than the necessities and the kind of admin and all this kind of things.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the software is a nice mix, I think, of the automated, where it's all template based, but you write your templates and you personalize it. So we use like tags where it can be a bulk message or an automated message that goes out, but it's personalized to the guest. So it's, hi Karen, you're in room 10 today. This is your person that can help you direct any queries to Paul at this number. So you can still personalize it, but also have that back and forth chat type conversations as well. So it's making it special for them remotely.
Brilliant. No, really interesting ideas, Karen. Thanks for sharing those, and something for all businesses to think about, I guess, because now more than ever that managing things remotely, if we can do certain aspects of running our businesses, now is the time to perhaps try that, isn't it? So it's technology that is out there that could be useful in helping us open up in the new norm and stick to some of those guidelines and rules and so on that are coming through.
Yeah, definitely. There's also, so one of the things that's coming in some of the states in America, so we may see it here as well, is the requirement for having the contact details of every person that's staying. So normally we would get just the lead person, the person who's made the booking. So, and there might be, 3 or 4 of us staying. You'll only have that one contact detail. So what we've done is we've updated our registration forms to allow you to capture the contact details of everybody that's staying, so that you've got then if there is an unfortunate outbreak or whatever, at least you know everyone and you can get the details to them directly.
Yeah, that'd be really handy. I wouldn't be surprised if something like that does come in at some point, because the whole contact and trace and test sort of scenario that we're moving to ultimately as we come out of the sort of general lockdown could be super important. So maybe it will be this side of the pond, as they say, in the near future. Great, thank you, Karen. And obviously, eviivo's starting a partnership with Guest Talk, so it's great to have you on board. We're working with more partners now that are sort of experts in their own tech field, plugging that into eviivo Suite. So for the eviivo Suite users on the call, look out for more news soon as to how you may be able to integrate Guest Talk with your eviivo Suite too, and hopefully make some of those tasks that could be done remotely done going forward. So yeah, watch this space. Thanks, Karen. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, no worries.
Good stuff. So, James, how are we doing for time? Not too bad. Any sort of final questions that maybe David can perhaps pick up on whilst you...
Yep, sure. So we've got lots of questions just on Guest Talk. So some of the specifics on Guest Talk, I've put up a link on the chat for those of you who had wanted more information. David, let me there we go. David, so we've got a lot of questions around some of the kind of financial support that's been put in place by governments and local authorities around sort of deadlines for applying. Is there any kind of anything you can just say to or direct people to where they can find that information if they've missed it during this kind of series of webinars?
Okay, we've been advising for the last few weeks on the local authority help, this local authority discretionary grant fund that was announced beginning of May, and is now open to people even if you're self-employed and had the self-employed help. It is from your individual local authority, so that's where to check on their website. Some of them are closing. We heard from one that's closing on Friday of this week. Some are sort of are closing sort of imminently their application form. So the message is check quickly if you haven't applied yet and get your application in. We've heard from other B&B's members that they've already had their grant fund paid. So some people have received it. Some local authorities are quicker than others. So some have not had their application forms up for very long. So those ones will obviously keep them up longer. But even in the one we heard from, I've forgotten which local authority it was, we'd heard from that was closing on Friday, they told us that they're holding back some funds for a second, for those who are late. So it might not be the end of the world if it does officially close. They might, it's still worth contacting them, your local authority, and they can advise you if you can still apply or when they'll reopen again. But the message is keep checking your local authority website and apply quickly.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Thank you. A few more questions, David, on a few questions about the 14-day quarantine period. So that's if someone becomes ill while staying. Has the government given any kind of guidance on the cost of that extended stay? Is that something that the guest and their insurance would cover, or is it something which is kind of left open to?
They haven't said yet, but I'm pretty certain that there wouldn't be any government help financially for that. So it would be a question of either the B&B or the guest or their insurance company paying. Okay. I think it's very, very unlikely that there'll be further help from the government on that, I'm afraid. But we're monitoring what their advice is going to be on that, and whether guests will have to stay for 14 days or not. It's still not quite clear yet what the official advice is going to be. And the official advice is going to be published by government maybe this Saturday, but maybe up to middle of next week.
Okay.
And yeah, okay.
Great. And just, a couple of, a lot of questions about the risk assessments themselves. A couple of questions in terms of the scope of those risk assessments, in terms of, obviously, we're guessing they'll cover the kind of things like hygiene and cleaning. Do you know whether they'll extend to some more specialist facilities like swimming pools, like septic tanks? Have you had any visibility of what those will look like?
The guidance will, the UK hospitality guidance, which we're adding to, will cover things like swimming pools, spas. I know not many B&Bs will have a spa, but it will cover things like swimming pools, spas, lifts, all sorts of things that not many B&Bs may have, but there has been advice given on them.
Okay.
So yes, that should cover. And of course, in your own risk assessment, you will need to address those areas as well, and make sure that every aspect has been thought through.
Great. And just a quick question on the clarity on the risk assessment in terms of how that's done. These are risk assessments that the B&Bs will carry out themselves. So these are not services that the B&Bs are going to have to procure from environmental health or any professional. These are...
Yes, you have to do the risk assessment yourself. It's the same principle as you have to do currently for the fire risk assessment. You have to do your own. As a small business, you don't by law have to write it down, but it's very sensible to write it down. And as I say, we'll be giving example templates and example completed ones to show people the sort of things people do. And it's sensible to write it down just in case you get a visit from anyone who then asks about your risk assessment. And if you say we've done it but you haven't written it down, it's not so convincing. So, and it's just better to understand it yourself for your own business, to write everything down. And it's not necessarily a huge long document, but you'll see examples when they come out. But it just cover in brief terms each main area of the business and what you've done about making it safer.
Right. Perfect. And Karen Wells, more than one request for your recipe for cleaning septic tanks. Who knew that would be such a, so if that's something you're happy to share, then share it with Paul and I, and we'll make sure that it's shared with the group. Yeah, I think that kind of covers the main
Brilliant.
point.
Thanks, James. That's great. Good. Yeah, so we just tripped over 5. So, we're just keen to get sort of some more feedback from David there. Thank you on those final questions. We seem to have loads today, so thanks everybody for submitting those. We run these every week, these webinars, so please look to join in, hopefully again next Wednesday. And any ideas or questions that you have in the meantime, events@eviivo.com is the email address to send them through to. We've recorded today's webinar as well, so any sort of people coming on late, that will be up on our eviivo.com share-webinar page, hopefully tomorrow. And you'll be able to review the full webinars there, and all the webinars we've done in this series, and there's lots of useful information and advice on all of them, including lots about cleaning, which is a super important hot topic at the moment. To that end, I'll just mention the eviivo masterclass tomorrow on cleaning for eviivo suite users. That's at 4 p.m. Email's been sent round on that, and there'll be a reminder for the link on that going around tomorrow as well. So it just leaves me to say thanks to everybody who's joined us today on the webinar, all the people listening and watching in. And thank you, of course, to David and to James for help hosting today. And of course, to our guests, Melinda and the 2 Karens. Thank you very much for coming on, and thanks for your time and all your advice. Good stuff. So that's it from me this week. Hopefully see you all next week. And in the meantime, look after each other and stay safe.